Hi, everyone. Today we're going to sit down with Jeffrey Fryer of Fryer Performance and go over some strength training and on the bike training for track sprint specific stuff. Jeff personally trained me and took me from about 1400 watts, adding almost 800 watts to my peak power, stopping at 2200 watts. A lot of this without even gym work. So he definitely knows his stuff and definitely could learn a lot from him. So let's see what he has to say.
Geoff, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.
So we're gonna end up talking about like intro to strength training for cycling, and a lot of this will carry over to other sports too, should you be interested in other stuff. But we'll let Geoff go into details there. Right on. So where do you want to start?
I think the biggest thing with any kind of when you're looking to get into any kind of new stuff or add stuff to your regular training, you have to kind of look at why, right? So like what you're trying to do, why you want to actually pursue this path, right? So whether it's trying to add more stuff on the bike, whether it's trying to add more yoga, add more weight training, add more whatever. I think you have to look at why and not just kind of blindly follow whatever your other friends in your group are doing or have said that has really helped them out. I think that's the biggest key is know your why and know what you're trying to actually accomplish with any kind of addition or new training program.
I definitely see that one a lot around here, where their training basically is just whatever their friends are doing. It's like, you
Right.
guys have drastically different goals. Why are you doing the same thing?
Right. Or they don't want to pay for a coach, and they're like, hey, so what are you doing, and can I get what you're doing, right? It's either like, can I get it, can I know what you're doing, can I see what weights you're doing. Whenever people are on a completely different timeline, completely different body type, completely different training age, completely different age too, right? Like guys that are like, 38, 40, want to try to do whatever their 20, 21-year-old hot shot on the team is doing. So which never really works out well. At least it doesn't really work out for long.
No, it usually gets people hurt for sure. So when you're designing training for somebody, where do you like to start after you figure out their goals?
I think usually I have, and it kind of shifts between like 12 to 22, 25 questionnaire, where I try to get what they really want to do, what they have been doing, where they want to go, where they think they're really good and where they think they're not really good.
Where they're actually really good.
Where they think they're good but they're probably not. So that way, like, I can kind of line things up with what we talk about, and more so if that kind of jives with whatever the performance assessment I get myself, as well as their subjective performance assessment. So, and two, I think a big key is knowing what they've done earlier in like life, and if they've gotten hurt, if they have issues now, how much time a week they can train, how much time per week they are right now, and how much they like work, right? Because if they want to train 15, 20, 25 hours, and they work 40 to 50 hours a week, you know, that's where goals don't really line up with the real world. So you kind of have to, that's kind of how we look at them to see where they are, why they're doing what they're doing, and what's the best course of action going forward.
Yeah, and I think that one was directed towards triathletes specifically.
Not not gonna go there.
But
Almost
yeah,
did.
almost. But no, you can do a lot with minimal amount of time. Like you gave me some huge improvements while I was working full time and really not training that much quantity, but with an emphasis on quality.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people try to make things too complex, because they're trying to sell whatever they're trying to sell, and they're trying to sell what they're trying to sell, that they have this kind of
Magic formula or something
that you like don't, and that you can't ever learn, so that you don't leave them, right? Whereas I think anybody who knows what they're doing will basically openly tell you what they like, what they know. They'll very, very, very openly share with you almost any thing. I think that's a big key, right? And to knowing if who you're trying to really work with has been in it for a long time, and that they know what they're really doing. And then basically, like, if you get a really good vibe, then like that's probably a good sense, because whenever we bring on someone, we're trying to see if we want to work with them just as much as they're trying to see if they want to work with us. And that's not said in a really bad way, right? It's more so there are good fits, and there are really, really not good fits. And I think that's person to person, sport to sport, life experience too. Whereas some people don't want someone who's really young. Some people want someone who's a bit older and seems like they've been at it a lot
nicer.
longer. Yeah. Age does not equate to being wise. So I think I think that's a really good point into learning how to, or doing your best to find a coach, both and that's kind of anybody that kind of, I think that probably goes to anything in life, is like trying to find those that fit with you well. That I think it's going to be a win for both of you. I think things go a whole lot better whenever both of y'all are trying to move towards the same goal at the same rate.
That was one thing I liked about training with you, is you were willing to answer 1,000. You probably could have wrote a book with how many questions I asked you over the course of like 2 years.
But like, I think that's what's really, really key, right? Is whenever you can actually ask them why. If they don't know why, they'll say like, let me go like see, right? And if
that's good.
Or if they don't know why and they're trying to kind of dance, if they won't say it's because of this, or I don't know, let me go see, then usually, like, it's not necessarily that they're bad. It might just be that they haven't put a lot of thought into what they're doing with you, which is kind of a pretty bad sign, because you really want to be on the same page, and that usually means that you're not. It doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that's part of your job when you try to actually interview someone, because it's a very, very intimate type process. Nah, that's a really bad way to fucking say that.
We can cut out that little bit.
It's a very, very personalized process, right? Where you are going to try to work with them once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, 3 or 4 times a month, whatever you guys have worked out, right? Yeah. And you need to be able to talk with them well. You need to be able to be completely honest. And I think when you're not on that same level is whenever paths diverge a bit too much, and then you're no longer working towards the same goal at the same pace.
I think that talking to each other part is a good one, because you and all of my coach friends are always like frustrated with athletes that going on, and then they bury themselves, and like they don't let you adjust things consider to their life circumstances, because life happens.
And like that's what's really hard, right? Is like even the most like, even if all you actually are able to do is train, you still have like life that actually goes on, and you have to adjust for that. And when you're not honest and really, really open, that's when, again, it's really, really hard to work towards the same goals. And that's when you or they get lost in the whole rush of things. Definitely. So and it ends up someone getting hurt, someone getting mad, someone getting super, super burnt out, is when you don't feel like you can be honest. And say, I've had too much, or I just need to pass on what we're trying to do. Not because I don't want to do it. It's just like, I just can't, And I think people who take that as a bad thing, and as to say someone's not really trying to work hard, it's like, that's where things start to break.
Communication's good.
Yeah.
Definitely. So once you find a coach, figure out what you're looking for in a coach, what should you be looking for when you get into the gym?
I think the biggest thing that we've seen is so just because you've had a lot of weight training time in your life doesn't necessarily mean you can lift well. And I think also, if you used to lift when you were, a teen 20s, 25, whatever, and say you're 40, 45 now, or even 30, 35, you're not the same. If you haven't done it in years and years and years, you've probably changed quite a lot. So you probably are not able to move the same as you were. You may have gotten hurt since then. You may have put on some extra weight. Things such as that. So I think if you already know how to lift, find a good coach that can kind of help make sure that you are still able to move well and are still able to go through the basic
moving like you think you are.
Yeah, and just to help you work with any kind of pain, injuries, whatever that you may have found along the way in life. So finding someone who can help improve your physical literacy,
Yeah.
I think is really, really key. So yeah, I think the first key is to finding a weight training, weightlifting, strength training coach, whatever you want to say, that can help you either learn how to move or help make sure that you can still move well. I think those are two of the big key things. Because
I'll go for it.
You're
I was gonna say, what are some of the key movements that you should be learning?
I think the big thing that people try to argue about all day long is what is a lot more complex stuff that like, oh, I've like heard that so and freaking so is doing this, or so and so is doing this, blah blah, or does this work, or what's the best training for X stuff, or what's the but yeah, right. And I think the best place to start, and not many people, I guess a lot of people will argue, but whatever. Learning the super basic multi-jointed full body compound weight training moves. So squat, deadlift, bench, rows, pull-ups, stuff like that are super basic, but then have a lot of actual if you can get those down well, you can move into other moves that are actually based off of those really, really well. But if you don't learn those well, then you're gonna set up pretty poor movement patterns, and maybe end up getting hurt, maybe not being able to lift as much down the line when you're trying to work in the upper weights or upper low volume and such. So if you learn how to push, pull, so squat, deadlift, bench, row, pull-ups, those are super key basic things. And then if you can teach someone how to teach you how to actually jump and land, so landing very, very strong, and not landing just on your like toes, on your heels, making sure that you're in a good, strong, braced position, so that you're not going to get hurt. Stuff like that. And then personally, if you can find an actual weight lifting coach that can teach you Olympic weightlifting, and not necessarily like the full lifts, but you know,
like I'll have you do like clean pulls for me and things like that, or it's not the full thing. And
yeah. So more Olympic lifting derivatives, and learning how to actually do those well, because you don't have to learn the harder to learn catch portion of like those, and those have a really, really high carryover to almost any sport out there. So finding someone who both knows what those are, because a lot of people will say they do, but that's really really key, is that they can actually do them themselves, or at least get someone in the gym to help show you, right? So finding a weight training coach that can actually is able to teach those, as well as learn how to best put them into your weight training program, right? So if you can find someone who is a seasoned weightlifting coach who knows how to do that and knows how to actually put together strength and conditioning for sport specific needs, that's super super big. And that means that you're not going to have a whole lot of fluff. It'll be super you can size like 3, 4, 5 lifts, and not really much more than that. And if you're trying to be in the gym for an hour and a half, you really can't do more than that, and lift at the weight that you really really need to be able to make really really good physical adaptations.
On that note, how do you like to judge loading weights? Like, do you
so when you're
like it up each time? Like, how do you base that?
I think, especially for this chat, the easiest way to say that is to, once you're able to move well and actually execute the lifts as well as you can for right now, and can put on load with still being safe. Finding a weight that makes you feel like you're like it's a actual challenge, right? But not so much so that you're scared that you can't complete all sets and reps. There is a time and actual place for that, but that's way down the line.
Probably should be working with the coach at that point.
Yeah, and just learning. I think the biggest thing is learning how, like, what feels like a actual load to like you. Let's go back to workout structure and talk about how to put together a basic point from which to start.
Okay.
Right. So knowing that you've already worked with someone, or you're fairly confident in your current lifting abilities, like a good place to start of how to structure like 4 to 5 or 6 lift training session would be choose some kind of speed / power move. So a jump, some kind of Olympic lift or Olympic lifting, partial movement, a lower body push or pull, so squat, deadlift, a upper body push or pull, bench, row, pull up, stuff like that. Any kind of pressing and or pulling, and you can do 2 of those 2. You don't have to just choose one. And then any kind of other accessory work that you may need. So if you have rough torn up shoulders, you can do some more lateral or front or bend over lateral raises to help to help pull those back in. Or if you just want to like do some more lifts to get bigger, you can start doing those at the end, not at the front part of the training session. And then at the end, you can do some more mid-section work and such.
Okay, so basically start with the explosive stuff and then move to like the compound heavy stuff and then accessory stuff kind of after that.
Yeah, because you want what takes the most central nervous system drive. You want to do that first, because if you're trying to do jumps and stuff after you've done super heavy squats, it's probably not going to go well, and you're probably not going to adapt to it like you would want to.
Makes sense.
And you also increase your risk of getting hurt as well.
Yeah.
So
Definitely emphasize the quality on those fast movements.
sure, for sure, and those can actually serve as a pretty good warm up for your more heavy squats, deadlifts, and stuff like
When
that.
you're doing the heavy stuff like squats, how are you thinking on movement? Do you want to still move as quickly as you can while maintaining form, or do you want to just power through and go super heavy?
So I think the biggest thing is always making sure you can if at any point your form is starting to break down, just to stop. No lift, no matter how big or is worth getting hurt. If you're hurt and can't compete, then that kind of defeats the whole purpose.
One hero moment can set you back a few months.
Yeah, or even more, right?
Yeah.
So I think I think the biggest thing is to stay safe by being able to that even if you're trying to lift with even as you're trying to lift with maximal intent to move, you're still lifting within. You still have control of your actual lifts. So at no point are you ever wild and out of control, which I think you've seen in a lot of others out there trying to get super amped up. While that works here and there, if you can lift with complete control and intent to move, you're going to have a much greater sport specific carryover.
Makes sense. So where should you start loading wise?
I think a good place to start, once you're able to have stable and workable technique through the full range of the actual lift, finding a weight that is a good middle ground where you're not gonna actually throw the weight through the roof, but you're able to complete all prescribed sets and reps with good form, and you're not going to absolute max. So kind of that middle ground where it's a weight that makes you feel like you have weight on your back, in your hands, whatever, so that you have to still maintain focus, but you're not actually you're not dead by the last rep.
Makes sense.
So
And one that was interesting that you talked to me about with the heavier you go at a certain point, it just all feels heavy, but you just move faster or slower.
right. I think I was actually telling one of my kids about that the other day. Of like, there comes a point where like for all of your main type lifts, it's gonna feel the same. Like I think that's where video or having an actual coach there can really help, because those days where the same weight as you did last week feels like it weighs 10 times more. But when a coach is there, or when you actually video it, the lift looks really good, and it looks quick, but it feels like you're moving through quicksand, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really big, because that that's the actual point where you need that secondary feedback, to really be like, all right, that was a lot, but it still moved really well. So I can still go up in like weight. So
Nice.
yeah.
So after that, where do you like to go?
I think that gradual 5 or 10% more every like week, and knowing that you're not going to try to go up week after week after week after week after week. So a really easy way to kind of start is when you start at, say, squatting a like a 100 on day one of week one, right? So day one, week two, you squat 105. Day one of week three, you squat 110. That's just like a super easy, gradual, progressive overload. And then on week four, or if you choose to go, if you can choose to continue to load, which I don't recommend necessarily, especially for people who are just kind of starting out, is trying to take an easier deload on that fourth week. So going back down to the weight you did week like one, or maybe even less than week like one. But then month after month after month, like you're able to start at a actual higher and higher point. Um, so say block like one, you go you go 100, 105, 110, back down to one 100. Block two, you can say start at 105, go up to 110, 115, back down to 105. So that's just like a super easy, gradual, progressive overload that will keep you safe, while still giving you a actual, like, you're able to still challenge yourself over like time and avoid that kind of plateau in strength gains.
Yeah, like yeah, definitely. It's a long game. It's not something you're gonna build overnight. The
No,
strength
I
work.
think especially for those that are trying to listen to this, like it doesn't happen in 2 3 months. You can start to see you know changes in 2 or 3 months, but from point A to point B takes months and months and months and years. Growing doesn't happen over like night. So I think learning how to keep 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 at it day in day out, and just continue to chip a a away at it, and um, just stay safe, and being able to still lift well, and month after month after month is super big.
Keep your ego out of it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing in the world, especially when you have to go to some of the more public gyms, not worrying about what others think of you, because once that comes into play, usually getting hurt comes on the actual back end of that too. So
Yeah, definitely easy to hurt yourself on this if you overreach a bit too much.
yeah, right. And so, when we look at trying to add in strength training into your normal training load, right? I think first you kind of have to see how that fits into what you're already trying to like do. Now it's easier said than done if you have a on the bike coach who doesn't necessarily know how to actually program in strength training. And then you have to get them to talk to whoever is trying to put together your strength and conditioning program. And that can and usually is really hard because not many people are willing to go above and beyond for that. Because most certainly what you're doing in the gym is going to affect what you do on the actual bike. And you want them to more complement each other instead of contradict each other. I think that's a big lesson that a lot of people need to take away from this. It's because not often do you have a coach who can actually write on the bike and in the gym stuff that is written well on both like sides. It's just one of those things that you don't see much of,
especially at the elite level, like strength coach, bike coach.
Yeah,
and the
right?
bike coach is like usually a specialized for that specific style of cycling.
Yeah, and that's across. I think you see that across all professional level stuff, right? And yeah, and the thing that's hard is everyone needs to know what everyone else is actually doing, but that team-wide communication is really, really hard. So at the very least, you need to be able to go from one to the actual other and tell them what your on the bike focus is, so that they can most accurately put together a strength and conditioning plan that works well with what you're doing right now.
I'm sure looking at like where you're at in the season factors in a lot there.
Yeah, and like if you decide to start a strength and conditioning plan like the middle of your year, I won't say it's a bad idea, but make sure you're keeping sets and reps low and load fairly low too, and know how you're gonna respond, and knowing when in the week to actually do it, right? So I think a big thing is people decide, they're like, oh, I really, really want to go do this, so I'm going to do it at night, right? When you've already done so much during the actual day, or they want to do it right after they get off the actual bike. And that's the quickest way in the world to get hurt. And to also fairly well cancel out any other training that you're trying to actually do. And a really quick way to make your coach mad. And I think
can you lift and ride on the same day?
You can, as long as you have them spaced far enough out, right? So kind of if you were to say finish your on the bike session at like 10, if you're trying to lift by like 4, cool. Or depending on where you are in the year, you may want to, I always like to lift before I ride. A lot of people, depending on where they are in the year, depending on what the training emphasis is, you can switch that around. But definitely know that if you're trying to lift a lot after you've already had a really hard on the bike training, you're probably not going to lift as much as you could before. If you did it before that, which is why you have to learn how to like what comes first. Depends on where you are in the actual year, right? So if you're in your race like year, then yeah, you can lift at the actual end of the day, because the loads aren't going to be as like high as they are in your quote unquote off season.
What was the system you were talking about that basically was your reasoning behind lifting before riding? Like,
Uh,
or
what was that one
it's
about?
like MOTR.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
was it like an energy
M,
system or?
it's mTOR, which is the muscle building metabolic pathway in the body.
Okay.
And if you do aerobic activity too close to after you lift, then you basically turn that off. Uh, and That's kind of why it depends on what your training in emphasis is as to what works better and how you shift the day. But then I also think that most people who have regular jobs aren't able to train twice per day.
Yeah.
But like, it's still a thing to put into your mind of like, uh, um, yeah, of how much to lift throughout the like week, um, and you can lift once or twice and still see pretty good gains as long as you give it enough like time. Because adding 2 days and even three to a pretty packed training plan like is really hard, and it can really hit you hard, and a lot of people will get really bummed because the other stuff starts to their on the bike starts to go down when they actually add that in, which people don't necessarily know how to account for. I think that's a big thing to keep in like mind is like you're not going to get better overnight, but if you have planned rest times and planned and are able to actually eat well and recover well, then you will see gains over like time. But don't be disheartened whenever you see power on the bike go down a bit when you start adding in stuff, because that's um, you just haven't built back up to baseline and then above that actual baseline yet.
So are you implying you can't be peaked at all times throughout the year?
I am most saying that 100%.
I think a few people need to hear that.
Right. And I think that's kind of the really, really big thing of like what matters most is that you're able to perform on race day. And
You can't have 5 A races a year.
right, you're not going to feel great all the time, and that's not a bad thing, right? But it's learning yourself and how you respond to certain types, and know when you need to rest more, know when you need to eat more, know when you need to cut training short, and being able to talk with your coach and understand how to do that well, and not just be like, oh well, I really really feel bad today, so I'm just gonna not do this. It's like, well, let's try something else in its place, and then try to shift that round, because it might be a really key workout for you in that like week.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's times when part of the plan is to do a workout while deeply fatigued.
Yeah. So, so yeah, that's where talking with your coach and having a good back and forth comes in really big handy. Yeah. So I think the easiest way to talk about fueling is basically, without going into the weeds, because you can get down a pretty big hole.
Very easily.
Is making sure you're eating enough throughout the training session to still fuel central nervous system drive, because the more you can stay on like point, the more quality the entire training session will like be. That's kind of too why you don't necessarily want to be in the gym for more than hour and a half. Is anything you do on on like on on past that, you're not really you have the potential for less quality, and then you're just kind of not doing much.
Just wasting time.
Yeah, and just adding to fatigue where you don't really need to add to it. So you're not really training well. So I think how like having readily digestible carbohydrate within the actual training session and right afterwards, not 30-40 minutes afterwards, but like so say you have 75 grams of actual carbs, drinking probably like 30 grams of that throughout your actual lift, and then trying to finish that within the first 10-15 minutes after you stop, along with a readily digestible protein shake, like a whey. If you can combine those two together, like that tastes really, really good, or you have separate bottles for those, whatever works well for like you. But essentially trying to replenish as much muscle glycogen as you can, so that way you can jumpstart the actual recovery, and you're not kind of trying to always dig yourself out of this like hole. And that goes too if you're trying to train twice in one day, like that becomes really, really hard to still give in two quality training sessions. So making sure you're eating enough. So if you feel dead and flat, say the end of the week versus when you do the first of the week, you're probably not eating enough, both during the actual training session and then from day to day to day. I think if we could say the biggest takeaways from this: learn how to lift correctly, lift heavy, and learn how to fuel training appropriately, and learn how to get really good sleep.
Which is relatively simple in theory, and practice
It's
sometimes
simple, it's
difficult.
not easy. I think that's the biggest thing, and we're always trying to learn how to adjust all those for our current lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think the biggest lesson is don't try to turbo a Civic. So don't just, which means don't just do speed power training. Get really, 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 really strong first, and then start to work into the speed power stuff.
Makes sense. Yeah, because the strength takes a long time to build. The power stuff seems to come on pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's
with the right genetics, of course.
Well, but too, like that's the really, really funny thing is like without that actual base, like the more high speed stuff is like this much. Like it doesn't do that much.
Yeah.
But it's more like if you look at like a matchstick, like like strength is that like the full entire stick. Speed stuff is that little bitty white tip.
Right on. Well, Geoff, thanks for joining us, man. Yeah, we'll look forward to doing more of these in the future. So if you guys have any questions, just leave them in the comments below. Be sure to check out Geoff's social media pages. I'll link to those in the description. If you like the content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Helps me out, encourages us to do more of these. No, I'm not above shameless self-promotion. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming along.
Always, man, always.